Welcome back. I'm with my guests, Lebohang, Pheko and Xhanti Payi. They are giving their own economic and policy analysis of the situation in the country at the moment. It's a very difficult hand that President Cyril Ramaphosa inherited, isn't it? Should we give him a benefit of the doubt, and should we tamper with our expectations and say, you know, it's not going to be easy anyway. Let's moderate our expectations.
I don't know where he's listening, who he's listening to, or what information he's reading, what analysis he's getting. Because I think it was on that basis that we can say, let's give this guy a chance, because it seems that the direction is somewhat where, you know, that is reasonable, it's logical. So, for example, I think, you know, all nations are imbued with certain qualities and with certain resources. You know, some people didn't have gold, some people had some. But whatever you've got, you take and you say, this is what we've got, and how do we take what we've got and make it work? So we have a huge youth population, we've got some resources, we've got land, we've got air, all of these things. We add them together and we say, what can we do with what we've got? Now, here we are. I mean, I think we have more than 3 commissions working on the 4th Industrial Revolution. Now, the 4th Industrial Revolution, it seems to me the response is on the basis that this thing is coming to us and we have to do something. It is not on the basis that we think, actually, there's something that's happening there. Why are we always responding to things as opposed to looking at where we are and not at things coming at us all the time, and everything we do is to respond to things coming at us, but at looking at what we need to do and how we actually going to succeed. It is going to be difficult because everything gets disrupted. For example, we prepared for Y2K. And Y2K didn't arrive. But we had thought it was coming at us, and we spent a lot of money doing that. Now, we must say to ourselves, what are the key things that we need to do? And this industrial revolution might be something additive that we might plan to, but it can't be our central tenet on the basis of which we are going to develop. And again, that's why I'm saying one hopes that the president listens to maybe a wider view, and that we don't actually get involved in this one.
Now, we have a structure, NEDLEC. It's been there for a long time, and it was supposed to be a place where...
It's dead as what?
What is your view and assessment of NEDLEC and the role it's played over the years? I mean, it was supposed to...
When last, Tim, did we hear an effective pronouncement? And I say that with all due respect to good colleagues of mine who sit there and try to make it work. But I mean, when last did we hear that any influential policy pronouncement, any ways in which the state has shifted? In particular, I mean, it's Labour's, business and a broad community, very broad,
and government,
loosely framed community structure, of which business sometimes, when they feel like being mischievous, also convert themselves into the community for their own convenience. So, I mean, I think that those sorts of that kind of trilateral arrangement, in principle, could have been useful, but it's not vibrant. We don't hear from it. It becomes another rubber stamping, and quite frankly, also a kind of a cliquey way of doing business and managing the economy. It's not transparent enough. We don't receive. There's not much accountability about the decisions that are taken.
On the back of that, let's unpack then the role that the different sectors should be playing and whether they are playing that role or not, starting with government itself as policy makers and regulators, right? The way government is fashioned, is it adding value? I mean, does it have the appropriate capacity to help deal with the pressing challenges of the time, of the moment? The fact that the economy is not performing and thus not creating jobs is obviously the major issue in South Africa at the moment.
And really, and the question you ask is, actually government must ask themselves, what is the role of government? And I suspect, and it should be different from country to country. There are countries, for example, in the US, the government does not concern itself with industrial policy because they are fashioned in a very different way. They are at a different stage of development, and that actually business and industry is much more developed. So they let industry decide how it wants to form itself, and the government then supports that. In our country, it's slightly different, right? Because, of course, we've got historical issues. We've got to have to support different kinds of citizens. So we need industrial policy. The question is now how we fashion that industrial policy and how government sees itself within that structure. The government, in the sense, I think we spent a lot of time, actually, where even cabinet government, where, government departments don't work together to find out what are you doing and how do I support that to make sure that everything actually works together. For example, I think what we have seen now, for example, is that, as you say, the president decided to, to conglomerate a number of departments to make sure that whether we become cheaper. And I think it's a mistake to first think about cutting costs rather than maybe thinking about efficiencies. If we think about housing and water affairs being brought together, is that going to give us cheaper or is that going to give us efficient and effective? Now, one thinks it's too big a conglomeration perhaps to give into one sector, because there are different dynamics that will happen over and different skills that will have to come through that, and how do you actually make that thing work? So government has to actually first ask themselves the question, what should be its role in this environment? And then also business, and how does it interact with business in this environment? Many times we do this thing. I mean, I heard yesterday a lot of people were saying, and today even, everybody's waiting to hear how the president is going to speak in terms of business. Right? We can't be focused only on business, because they are not the only important sector in our economy. And even when we think about business, what do we mean by business? Do we mean big business, big companies, or do we mean small businesses?
Because even there, in business,
and there's a huge bias towards big business. And when we're talking about big business, it's usually those who often are listed overseas. That's the other thing. So their interests are not even here. So it's very problematic for us to consistently be talking about business without indeed defining and desegregating what we mean. But are we talking about the guys who own butcheries in the township? Are we talking about the guys at the traffic lights who are we talking about the hustle economy? Are they also involved? Are we talking about small scale SMMEs in this country who are also trying, for whom in fact job creation is a huge imperative? I mean, 60-70% of people are employed by people in that particular sector.
The government, to my mind, has not stood back to look at the impact it has on small businesses, for instance, the amount of business that small businesses do with government. Do we know? And
the extent to which they even contribute to the GDP.
Absolutely. And I think we see then that, and I think we see it particularly in this discussion about ESCOM. Right. The discussion around ESCOM is not about providing energy, it's about saving this big conglomerate. Because if you think about it, we must save ESCOM, not provide energy. Because actually small businesses would do better if we actually decentralize ESCOM in such a way that people, for example, could be helped to afford solar energy. That would give them consistent, cheap and sustainable electricity over a long period of time.
In the case of ESCOM, the idea is to service the debt more than anything else.
Exactly. But that's exactly the point, right? Don't know what they gave. And so we are actually thinking differently. If we think about small business, we might actually have to let
here's another sector that's very influential in the South African economy, the labor movement, right? But I haven't had any discussion on what the responsibility of labor should be to create the opportunities to grow the economy so that the growing economy can create jobs. Or maybe it's not their place, but they do influence events, don't
they? But who is labor, Tim? This is another question, who is labor? Because again, there's been a huge bias towards people who are in organized labor, which are your large scale, and again, your 9-to-5 type of workers. And there's been a critique.
Actually, most of members of the unions work for the government, are in the public sector.
They are in the public sector, and others, of course, are in your large, your extractive sector, which is the other huge where a lot of our union membership comes from. But the notion of who is working and who is labor is also becoming quite contested, especially, and it's being contested especially as labor union membership declines rapidly. I mean, the ways in which, for example, COSATU 20 years ago, when they said we are closing down the city, we are putting down our tools, you felt it. Now it's like it's a murmur, it's not a roar. And I think that illustrates that they have also shifted their policy, their role, and abrogated their role as policy influencers on behalf of the labor of workers. But also they haven't managed to re-articulate younger workers, re-articulate the nature of work, the precarity of work. And those are the things that are very important to people, especially if you're a young person, you're a young graduate or non-graduate, you've just finished high school or not. And you have these voices which are not speaking for you. It makes the idea of membership unattractive, and it also means that they are not per se speaking on behalf of all labor.
But obviously South Africa is not only about problems, right? There are opportunities for the president. Let's isolate them. And we also tend to think, I'm as guilty as many other people, to think that everything that must come right will flow from the president. But it's an entire system, right? He's leading the ANC. One wonders, is it geared to the task? Is it focused on the matters at hand? That's question number one. Number two, where do the opportunities lie to correct the situation that we find ourselves in. You want to go first?
We were listening to this, and Lebohang talked about this idea, for example, that we are underfunding the Stats SA, right? This is where we want to be able to measure and see the opportunities, because, of course, once we know what we are facing, then we can pinpoint. For example, if you go to the Eastern Cape and you say, actually, let's look at the crux of infrastructure that is available. You know, remember, many of the factories that used to be there now are left behind. There are all these buildings that are not being used. If, for example, we sent a way in which we calculated, we did a survey of what is actually available that we could actually use, we could refashion. We take that and then we start from planning, because those are opportunities, because we already have buildings. We don't have to build all new infrastructure. We don't have to find new land. There are water resources. There's all sorts of things we can find there if we did a survey to establish what we've got. But we are not funding that because we are taking all the money and we're trying to fund SAA. We're trying to find, all sorts of defunct and all of these commissions. And so the question really is, are we even caring enough to look at the opportunities? Because it's one thing to measure the problems, like poverty. It's quite another also to look at the opportunities we've got. That also requires us to measure it so that we can say, actually look at what we've got. I mean, we still don't have an accurate survey of the land we've got. Even before we start to say we actually want to do restitution, we just don't have it. And these are parts of the opportunities we face, but we are living behind.
From your point of view, where do the opportunities lie? I can almost think of one, but you tell me from your point of view. One is the amount of corruption that we have in the country has been detailed. Names are being mentioned, just to impress, I think, in the short term, for lack of a word. One could say, look, we're fighting corruption, and these are the things that we're doing to demonstrate our seriousness in that regard. So,
I mean, people could go to jail. That would be one immediate thing, because it would actually give a sense in which we're intolerant of a culture of looting, and that there has to be accountability in some way. That actually is linked to public sentiment. Markets function well when the public and businesses, local and international, trust it and are optimistic and are encouraged by it. And I think there's a huge level of discouragement right now. And unfortunately, over the last 12 months, the talk and the walk have been a bit, have separated quite a bit. And I think the recent economic downturn and the revelation that the GDP has actually truncated further, despite the big talk, illustrates that it's not enough. We have to really have a real trust in the system. And the opportunities in that are that we need to then think about where then we can also collect different forms of revenue. The one is illicit financial flows, by the way. We don't talk about that. It's not a fashionable conversation anymore. But there are trillions of not only rands, dollars, US dollars, that are leaving this country and leaving the continent, which are unaccounted for. And that's an important conversation, because it means then that we should plan accordingly. We see that there's 1.2 trillion that has been put aside for industrial development. There are all these numbers, and we need to then trim ourselves.
I think when we conclude by saying the opportunities do exist, right? To deal with the current situation. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, it's not.
The situation can be improved. Lebohang, thank you very much. And Xhanti, much appreciated. Thank you very much for having been my guest. And that's all we had for you. Thank you for joining the Modise Network, and we invite you to tune in again next week. Have a great day.